The woman in his daughter's nursery was singing something soft and ancient, and Draevan Thornecliffe, king of the northern coven, terror of 3 centuries, could not make himself move from the doorway. His daughter's wails had torn through the estate like shattered glass only moments before, piercing even the thick stone walls of his study where he'd been reviewing blood tax reports. Alaric, his steward, had paled at the sound, both of them rising simultaneously. But Draevan had reached the nursery first, moving with the preternatural speed that made mortals see only shadow and wind, ready to destroy whatever threatened his child. Instead, he'd found her. A human woman with honey-colored hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, holding his 3-month-old daughter against her shoulder. Rocking gently, singing in a language he recognized as Old Gaelic, though her accent suggested she had no idea what the words meant. Just sounds, passed down through generations until they became simply a melody meant to soothe crying children. Little Isolde's screams had softened to hiccuping whimpers, tiny fists clutching at the woman's sweater. The woman hadn't noticed him yet. Her eyes were closed, cheek resting against Isolde's silver-white hair, and she swayed in a rhythm that seemed to come from somewhere primal and feminine and utterly foreign to Draevan's understanding. He had been a father for 3 months. He had been helpless for every one of them. Isolde's mother had died bringing her into the world. Vampire births were rare enough to be considered miraculous, dangerous enough to be feared. Serafina had known the risks, had wanted their daughter anyway, had made him promise, in those final moments as her ancient life bled away, that he would protect their child above all things, even above the coven, even above himself. He had not known that protection would be so loud, so demanding, so utterly beyond his capabilities. Vampires did not cry. They did not need comfort in the same way. He could give Isolde blood when she hungered, shelter from the sun, every material advantage his considerable power afforded. But when she wailed into the night for reasons he couldn't decipher, he stood useless, increasingly desperate, while human nannies came and went in rapid succession. Some quit, some he dismissed. None of them had ever made her stop crying like this. The woman's voice faded, the lullaby ending on a soft hum. She opened her eyes slowly as if waking from a trance, and that's when she saw him. To her credit, she didn't scream, just went very still, arms instinctively tightening around Isolde in a protective gesture that would have been laughable if it hadn't been so genuine. Her eyes were hazel, he noticed, green and brown and gold all at once, wide with shock but not quite fear. "I can explain," she said quickly, voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the baby now sleeping against her shoulder. "The door was open. I heard her crying. I wasn't trying to trespass. I swear I just couldn't." She stopped, seeming to realize she was babbling. Drew a breath. "I work for the cleaning service downstairs. We were finishing up and I heard her and I'm sorry, I'll go." But she didn't move. Because moving meant potentially waking Isolde, and something in this human woman's expression told Draevan that she'd rather face his wrath than be responsible for starting those tears again. He should dismiss her. Should be furious at the breach in security that allowed a human cleaning woman to wander into the private quarters of his home. Should call for Alaric to escort her out and ensure the agency sent different staff. Instead, he heard himself say, "What is your name?" She blinked. "Vivian. Vivian Porter." "Vivian Porter," he repeated, the name strange and modern on his tongue. He stepped fully into the nursery and she tracked his movement with those changeable hazel eyes. He knew what she saw. White hair that fell past his shoulders, pale skin that seemed to gather moonlight, features that were too sharp to be called handsome in any human sense, but had been described as beautiful in the way winter was beautiful. Dangerous, deadly. He wore black as he always did, well-tailored shirt and slacks that cost more than she likely made in a month, and his eyes, he knew, were the pale blue of ancient ice, inhuman. Unmistakable, she knew what he was. They all did. His household didn't hide it. Hiding was for vampires who feared humans, and Draevan feared very little. "How did you do that?" he asked, nodding toward his sleeping daughter. Vivian glanced down at Isolde, and her expression softened into something tender. "I don't know. My mom used to sing that to me. I sing it to my niece sometimes. Babies they like being held, I think. They like knowing someone's there." She looked back up at him, and there was something careful in her voice when she added, "I really am sorry for intruding. Should I put her down?" The crib stood against the far wall, custom made with blackout curtains that could be drawn around it to protect Isolde from any stray sunlight. Draevan looked at it, then at his daughter's peaceful face, and felt something twist in his chest. "Yes," he said quietly. Vivian moved with practiced care, crossing to the crib with steps so light she barely made sound. She lowered Isolde with the kind of gentle precision that spoke of experience, supporting the baby's head, settling her onto her back, pulling the soft blanket up to her tiny chest. Isolde stirred slightly, made a small noise, and Vivian's hand came to rest on her stomach, patting gently until the baby settled again. When she straightened and turned back to face him, Draven realized he'd been watching her with an intensity that might be considered inappropriate. She noticed, too, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. "She's beautiful," Vivian said softly. "How old?" 3 months. The words came automatic. Her mother died in childbirth. He didn't know why he'd told her that, didn't make a habit of sharing personal information with humans, especially not ones he'd just met. But Vivian's expression shifted into immediate sympathy, the kind that looked genuine rather than performative. "I'm so sorry," she said, and meant it. "That must be incredibly hard." Hard didn't begin to cover it. Draven had lived for 347 years, had survived wars, power struggles, assassination attempts, and the slow turning of ages that saw everything mortal crumble to dust. Nothing had prepared him for this. For grief and new fatherhood combined into something that felt like drowning in darkness even deeper than his nature. "She cries often," he said, instead of addressing any of that. "The nannies I hire can't seem to soothe her." Vivian's brow furrowed slightly. "How many have you gone through?" 7. In 3 months, her eyes widened. "That's wow, okay." She seemed to be weighing something, chewing her bottom lip in thought. Then, carefully, "Babies can sense stress. If the nannies are uncomfortable here, Isolde will pick up on that. Make her more unsettled." "You're saying my household frightens them?" "It wasn't a question. I'm saying working for a vampire might be intimidating for some people," Vivian corrected gently, "especially if they're caring for a vampire baby." "No offense taken, it's a reasonable fear." He moved closer to the crib, looking down at Isolde's sleeping face. "So tiny, so impossibly fragile. You weren't frightened?" "Oh, I'm terrified," Vivian said with unexpected honesty. "But the baby was crying. That kind of trumps self-preservation, I guess." Something about her bluntness surprised a sound from him that might have been the beginning of a laugh. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. Vivian seemed surprised too, her eyes finding his with open curiosity. "You need someone who won't be afraid," she said after a moment. "Or at least someone who can put the fear aside for her sake. Someone who knows babies. And where would you suggest I find such a person?" The words were barely out before he realized what he was asking, what he was implying. Vivian seemed to realize it too, her expression shifting into something complicated. "Uncertain. I have a full-time job," she said slowly, "with the cleaning company. And I take night classes 3 times a week, business administration. I would pay you more than both combined." The offer came without thought, pure instinct. He'd found something that worked for Isolde. He wasn't letting it go. "Your evenings would be your own, classes wouldn't be impacted. You'd simply need to be here from 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Care for Isolde. Keep her fed, clean, content." "That's not how hiring a nanny works," Vivian said, but there was no heat in it. "You don't just grab someone random who happened to calm your baby down once. I'd need references. You'd need to run a background check. There's a whole process." "I am the king of the Northern Coven," Draven said quietly. "I don't require references to know if I trust someone. I require my instincts, and my instincts say my daughter responds to you in a way she has to no one else." Vivian stared at him. In the dim light of the nursery, with Isolde's soft breathing the only sound, the moment stretched between them like something physical. He could hear Vivian's heartbeat, steady but elevated, could smell the faint scent of her soap, something clean and simple, could see the exact moment she began to seriously consider his offer. "I need to think about it," she finally said. It's a lot. I can't just I need to think." It wasn't a no. Draven found himself nodding. "Of course, Alaric will give you a card with our contact information. Take whatever time you need." "But Vivian?" He waited until her eyes met his. "I would be in your debt, and a vampire king's debt is not a small thing." She swallowed visibly, nodded, and then, with one last glance at sleeping Isolde, she left the nursery with quiet steps. Draven remained, watching his daughter breathe, and for the first time in 3 months felt something that might have been hope. 3 days passed before Vivian called. 3 days during which Isolde returned to her pattern of inconsolable crying, and Draven found himself thinking far too often about hazel eyes and gentle hands and a lullaby in ancient Gaelic. When his phone finally rang and Alaric informed him it was Miss Porter, he took the call in his study, standing by the window that looked out over the city lights below. "I'll do it," Vivian said without preamble when he answered. "But I have conditions. Name them." "First, I want a contract. Proper employment terms, hours, pay, expectations, everything in writing agreed. Second, I get weekends off. I need time for my family, my life outside this agreed. Third." She paused and he could hear her gathering courage. "Third, You don't use any vampire mind control or compulsion or whatever on me. Ever. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it with my own free will, and I need to know that's being respected. Draven felt something close to respect stir in his chest. I would never use compulsion on someone caring for my daughter. You have my word, Vivian Porter. Your mind is your own. He heard her exhale in relief. Okay? Then yes, I'll start Monday if that works. Monday is perfect. They discussed logistics schedule, payment that made her voice go slightly faint with shock, emergency contacts. When they finally ended the call, Draven stood by the window a moment longer, watching the city breathe beneath him, and wondered why he felt distinctly as if his life had just shifted onto a new path. Monday morning arrived with slate-gray clouds that promised rain. Draven had been awake since sunset the night before, as was his nature. Watched the sun rise from his underground chambers where he spent the dangerous daylight hours. Waited with uncharacteristic impatience for 9 o'clock. Vivian arrived exactly on time, escorted to the nursery by Alaric, who'd been briefed on the situation and merely raised one elegant eyebrow in silent commentary. She wore jeans again, this time with a soft blue sweater, and carried a large bag over one shoulder. "Good morning," she said, professional but warm. "Is she awake?" "She's been fed," Draven said, gesturing to the crib where Isolde lay fussing quietly, not yet worked up to a full cry. "But she's not happy about the morning." Vivian set her bag down and went immediately to Isolde, scooping her up with confident ease. "Hey there, little one. I know mornings are terrible, aren't they? Let's see if we can make it better." She glanced at Draven. "I brought some things. Books, toys appropriate for her age. Is that all right? Whatever you think she needs." "Okay." Vivian settled into the rocking chair near the window, Isolde against her shoulder, and began that same gentle sway. "You should probably go do your kingly duties or whatever. We'll be fine." He should. He had responsibilities. A coven to manage, territories to oversee, political alliances that required constant attention. But something made him hesitate. "You'll call if you need anything?" Vivian looked up at him and her expression softened slightly. "I promise. But she's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Go on." So he did, forced himself to leave the nursery, to descend to his study to focus on the papers and calls and endless administrative details that came with his position. But throughout the day, he found his attention drifting upward, listening. The estate remained quiet, no crying, no distress. Just the occasional soft sound of Vivian's voice filtering down. Though he couldn't make out words, at noon he went to check. Found Vivian on the floor of the nursery, Isolde on a blanket beside her, both of them focused on a black and white picture book. Vivian was making exaggerated facial expressions, pointing at the images, and Isolde was watching with the intense concentration that babies sometimes achieved. "Hi," Vivian said, glancing up. "We're working on tummy time. She's doing great." Draven realized he was witnessing something utterly mundane and somehow extraordinary. His daughter, content. Engaged, not crying. "Would you like me to bring you lunch?" he asked. Vivian blinked in surprise. "Oh, I brought a sandwich, but if you have a kitchen I can use." "I have a kitchen, though I admit it's underutilized." He hadn't eaten human food in over 3 centuries. "I'll have something prepared. Do you have dietary restrictions?" "No, I eat pretty much anything. Thank you." He nodded and withdrew, finding Alaric in the hallway wearing an expression of barely concealed amusement. "Don't," Draven said. "I said nothing, my lord." "Your face is saying plenty." Alaric's lips twitched. "It's simply good to see you taking an interest in household management. Shall I have the chef prepare something suitable for human consumption?" "Please." The day passed more smoothly than any since Isolde's birth. When 6 o'clock came, Draven found himself back in the nursery, watching as Vivian gently placed his sleeping daughter in the crib. "She had a bottle about an hour ago," Vivian said quietly. "Should sleep for a few hours now. I left notes, feeding times, diaper changes, when she napped. Everything you might need to know." "She didn't cry at all," Draven said, the observation feeling important somehow. "She fussed a little before her nap, but we rocked through it." Vivian gathered her bag, slinging it over her shoulder. "She's a sweet baby. Just needs patience and consistency." She moved toward the door, and Draven found himself following her out, walking her down the corridor toward the main entrance. They didn't speak, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. At the door, Vivian paused. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes, and Vivian?" "Thank you." She smiled then, soft and genuine. "You're welcome. Take care of her tonight." He did, managed the evening feeding himself, holding Isolde carefully while she drank from the bottle, her pale blue eyes so like his own, watching his face with that peculiar intensity infants possessed. She fell asleep in his arms, and he sat for a long time just holding her, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest, marveling at the fact that he'd helped create this perfect, impossible creature, The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Vivian arrived each morning, cared for Isolde with a competence that seemed effortless, and left each evening with soft goodbyes. Draven found his schedule arranging itself around those hours, found reasons to check on them throughout the day, found himself noticing small things about Vivian Porter that had nothing to do with her capabilities as a nanny. The way she hummed while changing Isolde's diaper, unconscious melodies that seemed to make the baby calm. The fact that she drank her coffee with an obscene amount of sugar and no cream. How she talked to Isolde like a person, narrating her actions, asking questions she obviously didn't expect answered. The small laugh lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her hair caught the lamplight when she leaned over the crib. He was noticing too much, thinking about her too often. It was inappropriate and foolish, and he was absolutely not going to act on any of it. Until the night everything changed. It was a Wednesday, 6 weeks into Vivian's employment. Draven had been in the city attending a council meeting with other coven leaders, tedious political theater that nonetheless required his presence. The meeting had run long, disputes over territory boundaries devolving into the kind of posturing that made him want to simply declare a decision by force and be done with it. By the time he returned to the estate, it was past 9 o'clock. He found Alaric waiting in the entrance hall, expression tight with concern. "What's wrong?" Draven demanded immediately. "Miss Porter called 3 hours ago, asked if she could stay late. Said Isolde was feverish and fussy and she didn't want to leave until she was certain she was all right." Alaric paused. "I told her you'd want her to stay, that we'd compensate her for the extra time. She said that wasn't why she was staying." Draven was already moving, taking the stairs to the second floor faster than human eyes could track. He reached the nursery to find it dimly lit, only the small lamp in the corner providing illumination. Vivian sat in the rocking chair, Isolde against her chest, a damp cloth in her hand that she periodically pressed to the baby's forehead. She looked up when he entered, and he could see the exhaustion in her face. "Hey, sorry, I should have called you directly. I didn't have your personal number, just the house line. How is she?" Draven crossed to them immediately, his hand automatically going to Isolde's forehead. She was indeed warm, too warm. Vampire children ran cooler than human babies. This was wrong. "Fever spiked around 5, Vivian said quietly. "I've been keeping her cool, keeping her hydrated. She's been sleeping on and off. I think it's just a cold or something viral, but I didn't want to leave her." She looked at him, and there was something almost apologetic in her gaze. "I know I should have probably just told you to come home, but I thought, you thought correctly." Draven gently took Isolde from her arms, cradling his daughter carefully. She whimpered at the movement, tiny face scrunched in discomfort, and his heart twisted painfully. "Thank you for staying with her." "Of course." Vivian stood, swaying slightly, and he realized she'd probably been in that chair for hours. "I can stay longer if you need, until she's better. You've been here for 12 hours, you need rest. So do you, probably." She moved to the crib, gathering the supplies she'd been using. "There's fever reducer appropriate for her age. I gave her a dose 2 hours ago. She can have another at midnight if she needs it. Keep her hydrated. The cool cloth helps. If the fever goes above 103 or she starts showing signs of distress beyond normal fussiness, you should call a doctor. Do you have a pediatrician? I'll call one now." "Good." Vivian finished packing her things, movements efficient despite obvious tiredness. When she turned back to face him, something in her expression made his breath catch. Concern, care. Not just for Isolde, he realized, but for him. She's going to be okay. Babies get sick, it's scary, but it's normal, you're going to be okay too. He wanted to tell her he wasn't scared, that he was an ancient vampire who'd faced true horrors and a sick child didn't frighten him. But it would have been a lie, and something about Vivian Porter made him want to be honest. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "Any of it. I can destroy enemies, I can command a coven. But this," he looked down at Isolde, so small in his arms, "I'm failing at this, you're not." Vivian's voice was firm. She stepped closer, and he could smell that clean soap scent of her, could hear her heartbeat steady and strong. "You're learning. That's what parenting is. You're showing up for her. That's what matters." Their eyes met over Isolde's head, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. The moment stretched, weighted with things neither of them were saying. Vivian broke it first, stepping back, shouldering her bag. "Call me if you need anything tonight. Alaric has my cell number. I mean at any time. I'll come back if she needs me, Vivian." He stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. "Thank you" felt inadequate. "You're good at this, at caring. It's a gift." She smiled, soft and a little sad. "My mom was sick for years before she died, cancer. I took care of her through most of it. I guess I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just be there. Make someone feel less alone." She moved toward the door, paused at the threshold. "You're not alone in this, Draven. Not anymore." Then she was gone, and he was left holding his feverish daughter, her words echoing in his mind like the lullaby she sang. "You're not alone." When had he last felt that? When had anyone cared enough to offer that comfort? The night was long. Isolde's fever persisted despite the medicine, and Draven found himself doing exactly what Vivian had instructed. Cool cloth, hydration, gentle rocking. Soft words and languages Isolde couldn't understand, but that seemed to soothe nonetheless. He called the pediatrician at midnight when her temperature spiked again, received reassurance that matched what Vivian had said. Keep her comfortable. Watch for warning signs. It would pass. Dawn was threatening the horizon when Isolde's fever finally broke. She fell into a deeper, more peaceful sleep, her skin cooling to normal temperature. Draven sat in the rocking chair holding her and felt something in his chest unclench. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Just checking in. How is she?" "Vivian." He typed back with one hand, careful not to disturb Isolde. "Fever broke an hour ago. She's sleeping peacefully now." The response came quickly. "That's wonderful. You did great. Get some sleep if you can." He should. Dawn was coming and he needed to retreat to his chambers before the sun rose. But he found himself typing again. "Thank you. For everything." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Anytime. See you at 9. He smiled at his phone like a fool, realized what he was doing, forced himself to stop, but the warmth in his chest remained. At 9 o'clock he answered the door himself, still carrying Isolde. Vivian took one look at them and her expression melted into relief. Oh good, she looks so much better. She reached out automatically, smoothing a hand over Isolde's silver hair, then seemed to realize what she'd done and pulled back. "Sorry. Instinct. Don't apologize." Draven found he didn't mind. Found actually that he liked seeing Vivian's hand gentle on his daughter. "She's been calm all morning. I think she's going to be fine, and you?" Vivian looked at him with those perceptive hazel eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" "I'll rest this afternoon." That's not an answer. But she didn't push, just held out her arms. "Let me take her, you look exhausted." He transferred Isolde carefully, watched Vivian settle her against her shoulder with practiced ease, and felt that strange warmth again. Gratitude, he told himself. Simple appreciation for competent help. He was lying to himself. He was beginning to realize that the weeks that followed brought a shift in the household. Subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. Draven found himself spending more time in the nursery, working from there rather than his study. Vivian would be on the floor with Isolde, building block towers for the baby to knock over, and he'd be at the small desk in the corner reviewing documents. They'd talk sometimes, small conversations about nothing important. Vivian's classes, Isolde's latest developmental milestone, the weather, the kind of mundane exchanges he hadn't engaged in for decades. He learned things. That Vivian was 26, had lost her mother 3 years ago, had a younger sister named Maya who was in college. That she was studying business administration because she wanted to open her own bookstore someday. That she loved old movies, the kind in black and white with dramatic scores and sweeping romances. That she bit her lip when concentrating and twisted her hair around her finger when nervous and had a laugh that sounded like music. He was noticing far too much, and worse, he was noticing that she was noticing him too. The way her eyes would find him when he entered a room. How she'd smile when he made dry observations about coven politics that amused her. The fact that she'd started bringing him coffee in the evenings, terrible human coffee that he didn't need, but found himself drinking anyway because she'd thought of him. Small touches that lingered a moment too long when they passed Isolde between them. It was dangerous. He was her employer. She was human. The power imbalance alone made anything between them inappropriate. But more than that, he was vampire. Ancient and other and far too easy to hurt fragile mortal things. He should create distance, should be professional, should stop finding excuses to be near her. He didn't. 2 months into her employment, the council called an assembly. Major gathering of all the coven leaders, required attendance, multiple days of political maneuvering that Draven couldn't avoid. He'd have to leave the estate, leave the city entirely. The assembly was being held in the old European territories and he'd be gone nearly a week. "I don't want to go," he told Alaric as they prepared for departure. It was a Friday evening, sun newly set, and his bags were already packed for the private flight leaving at midnight. "It's required, my lord. Your absence would be noted. Interpreted as weakness, I know." Draven looked toward the ceiling, toward the nursery above. "But Isolde has a very capable caretaker," Alaric said gently. "Miss Porter will stay with her. I'll be here to handle any emergencies. She'll be safe. It's not her safety I'm worried about." Though that was part of it. But more, it was missing a week of her life, missing Vivian's presence. He'd grown accustomed to both in ways that concerned him. He went to say goodbye. Found Vivian reading to Isolde from a picture book, both of them comfortable in the rocking chair. They looked up when he entered, and Vivian's smile faded when she saw his expression. "Everything okay? I have to leave. Council business in Europe. I'll be gone approximately a week." Oh, was he imagining the disappointment in her voice? That's fine. We'll be okay here. Won't we, sweetheart?" She bounced Isolde gently, earning a happy gurgle. "Alaric will be available for anything you need, and I'll be reachable by phone, though the time difference, Draevan." Vivian stood, Isolde in her arms, and crossed to him. "We're going to be fine. You don't need to worry. Go do your important Vampire King things. We'll be here when you get back." He wanted to argue, wanted to find reasons he couldn't leave. Instead he reached out, letting his fingers brush against Isolde's cheek. She grabbed his thumb in her tiny fist, holding on with surprising strength, and his heart twisted. "Be good for Vivian," he murmured to his daughter. Then, before he could stop himself, he looked at Vivian and said, "Thank you for everything. You've made these months bearable in ways I can't fully express." Color rose in her cheeks. "You don't have to thank me. I love taking care of her. She's special." "So are you," he said quietly, and watched her eyes widen, realized what he'd revealed. Stepped back before he could say anything more damaging. "I should go. I'll call when I land." He left before she could respond. Before he could do something monumentally stupid like touch her face or push her hair back, or any of the dozen things he'd been imagining far too often. The flight to Europe was long and gave him too much time to think. The assembly itself was every bit as tedious as he'd anticipated. Ancient vampires arguing over territories and blood rights and alliances, everything coded in elaborate courtesy that barely disguised the underlying threats. Draven played his part, made the appropriate alliances, showed the necessary strength, but his mind was elsewhere. He called every evening. Spoke to Alaric first for updates, then asked to speak to Vivian. She'd tell him about Isolde's day, small details that shouldn't have mattered but did. How she'd laughed at a silly face. How she was getting better at holding her bottle. How she'd reached for a toy and actually grasped it. Then they'd talk about other things. How the assembly was going. How Vivian's classes were progressing. Nothing important, everything important. "I miss you," Vivian said on the fourth night, then immediately seemed to realize what she'd said. "I mean, Isolde misses you, obviously. She keeps looking at the door like she's waiting for you." "Tell her I miss her too," Draven said, not correcting the initial statement because he missed Vivian just as much as his daughter. More maybe, in ways he was trying very hard not to examine. The fifth night, everything changed. He was in his assigned quarters, a suite in the old castle, where the assembly was being held, when his phone rang at 2 in the morning. Alaric's name on the screen. He answered immediately, already moving toward his bags. "What's wrong?" The estate was attacked. Alaric's voice was tight, controlled, but Draven could hear the underlying tension. "Rogue vampires, 6 of them. They breached the outer defenses approximately 20 minutes ago. We've neutralized 5. The 6th, a pause, is in the house. Miss Porter has locked herself in Isolde's panic room with the baby. She's safe for now," but Draven was already out the door, moving through the castle corridors with lethal speed. "I'm coming. Hold the line. Don't let anyone near that room. My lord, you're 3,000 miles away. I said I'm coming. 2 hours. Tell Vivian to hold on." He didn't wait for a response. Made the necessary calls to arrange immediate transport, a private jet fueled and ready, strings pulled, favors called in. Made it to the airport in 15 minutes. Paced the tarmac while the plane prepared, every instinct screaming at him to move faster, protect, destroy anything threatening his family. When had he started thinking of them that way? Isolde, obviously his daughter, but Vivian too. Vivian, who was locked in a panic room with his child, terrified because she worked for him, because he'd brought her into his world. The flight was the longest 2 hours of his immortal life. He spent it getting updates from Alaric. The rogue vampire had been identified as Cassian Vex, a former member of a southern coven who'd been exiled months ago for breaking blood laws. He'd apparently decided revenge against the Northern King was worth the risk. He'd chosen wrong when they finally landed. A car was waiting. Draven didn't remember the drive to his estate, only the moment he walked through the front door to find Alaric waiting, along with 6 of his personal guard. Blood stained the floor of the entrance hall. "Status," Draven commanded. "The rogue is cornered in the east wing, refusing to come out. We haven't breached because he's threatened to kill himself rather than be taken, and we wanted you to handle him personally." Alaric's expression was grim. "Miss Porter and Isolde are still in the panic room. She won't come out until she hears your voice confirming it's safe." Smart, terrified. Probably, but smart. Take me to the rogue first. They found Cassian in what used to be a guest suite, now torn apart by violence. He was young for a vampire, maybe 70 years turned, with the arrogance and stupidity that came with youth. He looked up when Draven entered, and something like fear crossed his face. "My lord, you attacked my home, threatened my child." Draven's voice was soft, deadly. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you where you stand." "I didn't touch the baby, I swear. I thought if I could take her, use her as leverage." He didn't get to finish. Draven moved faster than thought, had him by the throat, lifted off his feet. "You thought you could threaten my daughter. Not a question. A death sentence." Cassian gasped, clawing at Draven's hand. "Please no." It was over quickly. Brutal and final, and exactly what vampire law dictated for this level of transgression. When it was done, Draven dropped the body and turned to his guard. "Dispose of this quietly. Then double the estate's defenses. I want to know how he got through, and I want it fixed by sunset tomorrow." They moved immediately to obey. Draven left them to it, heading directly to the panic room. It was hidden behind a false wall in the nursery closet, accessible only by code. He entered the code, pulled the hidden door open, and found Vivian sitting in the corner of the small reinforced room, Isolde clutched against her chest, eyes wide and red-rimmed from crying. "It's me," he said quietly, staying in the doorway so as not to crowd her. "It's over. You're safe." Vivian stared at him for a long moment, as if verifying he was real. Then something in her seemed to break. She made a choked sound and scrambled to her feet, still holding Isolde, and stumbled toward him. He caught her automatically, arms coming around both of them, and she buried her face against his chest. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I heard fighting and Alaric told me to run, and I didn't know what was happening. I just grabbed her and ran. I didn't know if—" "Shh." He held her carefully, one hand cradling the back of her head. "You did everything right. You kept her safe. You're both safe now." She was shaking. He could feel the tremors running through her body, adrenaline and fear crashing now that the danger had passed. Isolde was crying softly, picking up on her distress, and Draven gently extracted his daughter from Vivian's grip, settling her against his own shoulder. "Come out of there," he said softly to Vivian. "Let's get you somewhere comfortable." He guided her to the nursery, sat her in the rocking chair, then moved around the room with Isolde, patting her back until her cries settled. When he turned back, Vivian was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You came back," she said. "Alaric said you were in Europe. That's hours away. 2 hours by private jet. You left an important assembly. For us, there was never a question." He moved closer, crouching so they were eye level. "Nothing is more important than Isolde's safety than your safety. I'm just the nanny." "You're not." The words came without thought, raw truth. "You're not just anything, Vivian. Surely you know that by now." She looked at him, and he saw the exact moment she understood what he wasn't saying. Saw her eyes widen, her breath catch. "Draven." "I know," he said quietly. "I know it's inappropriate. I'm your employer. You're human. There are 1,000 reasons this is a terrible idea. But I can't." He stopped, struggling with words. "When Alaric called and said you were in danger, I've never felt fear like that. Not in 3 centuries. I would have torn apart anyone who tried to hurt you. Because I take care of Isolde," she said. But there was question in her voice. "Because you matter to me, both of you." He couldn't say family, couldn't presume. "You matter." Vivian reached out slowly, her hand coming to rest against his cheek. He went very still, hardly breathing, as her thumb brushed across his cheekbone. "You matter to me too," she whispered, "so much. I kept telling myself it was just because I care about Isolde, that it was just the job, but it's not. It hasn't been for weeks." "This is dangerous," he said, even as he found himself leaning into her touch. "I'm dangerous. My world tonight proved that." "I know." Her hand slid back into his hair, gentle and warm. "I know what you are, what your life is, and I'm still here. I'm still choosing to be here." He searched her face, looking for fear or doubt, found only certainty. This extraordinary woman who'd walked into his life by accident and changed everything without trying, who'd taught him how to be a father, who made him want things he'd thought he'd lost the capacity for. "If we do this," he said carefully, "if we try this, I need you to understand something. Vampires mate for life. We don't do casual. When we love, it's absolute and consuming and permanent. If I let myself love you—" He stopped, realized what he'd said. "If we do this, I will never let you go. You need to be certain that's what you want. Are you saying you love me?" The question was soft, wondering. He looked at her, at Vivian Porter with her hazel eyes and messy hair and gentle hands, who'd shown him more kindness in 3 months than he'd known in 3 centuries. "I'm saying I'm falling, hard and fast. And if you give me permission, I'll fall the rest of the way and never look back." Her smile was tremulous and beautiful. "Then fall, because I'm already there." He kissed her then, carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull back. But she leaned in instead, her free hand clutching his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something warm and right and inevitable. Isolde made a small noise of protest at being squished between them, and they broke apart, both laughing softly. "I should put her to bed," Draven said. "I should probably go home, process everything that happened tonight." But neither of them moved. Just stayed there, close enough to touch something new and fragile building between them. Finally, Vivian stood, wincing slightly. "I'm going to be sore tomorrow." Sitting on that floor for an hour was not comfortable. "Take the weekend," Draven said. "Rest, recover. I'll care for Isolde. I thought you had to go back to the assembly? I'm done with that. My priority is here." He caught her hand, threading their fingers together. "Will you come back Monday?" "Of course." She squeezed his hand. "I told you. I'm choosing to be here." He walked her to the door again, neither willing to let go. Finally, Vivian pulled away with visible effort, stepping back. "Call me tomorrow, just to check in?" "I'll call." He promised. He did. Called Saturday afternoon, and they talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything. Called Sunday evening and spoke until she had to go to dinner with her sister. When Monday morning came, he opened the door himself, pulled her inside, and kissed her before she'd even said hello. "Good morning," she said when they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling. "It is now." They were careful at first, learning each other around the structure of their days. Vivian still arrived at 9, still cared for Isolde with the same dedication. But now Draven joined them more often, sat on the floor during tummy time, helped with feedings and baths, let himself be part of his daughter's life in ways he hadn't dared before. And when Isolde napped, he and Vivian would talk, really talk, about his long life and the loneliness of immortality, about her mother's death and the grief that still surprised her sometimes, about hopes and fears and the strangeness of what they were building together. "My sister thinks I'm crazy," Vivian admitted one afternoon. They were in his study, Isolde asleep in a bassinet nearby, Vivian curled in a chair with a book. "Dating my employer who happens to be a vampire king, she's not wrong. This is objectively inadvisable." Draven looked up from his paperwork. "What did you tell her?" "That you make me happy. That I feel safe with you." Which should probably be ironic given the whole vampire thing. "That Isolde needs both of us." She paused. "That I'm in love with you." His breath caught. "Vivian, I know it's fast. I know we should probably take things slower. But we don't really do slow, do we? Not with everything that's happened." She set her book aside, meeting his eyes. "I love you." I wanted you to hear it said out loud. He was across the room before he'd consciously decided to move, pulling her up from the chair and into his arms. "I love you," he said against her hair. "So much it terrifies me. I didn't think I could feel this way again. Didn't think I wanted to. But you." She tilted her face up, and he kissed her properly, deeply, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian laughed softly. "Your paperwork's going to wait a while longer, isn't it?" "Absolutely." They were learning to balance both sides of his life. The tender domesticity of caring for Isolde alongside the harsher realities of coven politics. Vivian saw both now, sat in on meetings sometimes, Isolde in her lap, and listened to disputes about blood territories and ancient laws. She didn't shy away from it. Didn't pretend his world was anything but what it was. "Does it bother you?" he asked one night. They were in his private chambers. She'd started staying later, sharing dinner even though he couldn't eat, just sitting together. "The violence. The blood. Sometimes," she admitted honestly. "But I grew up knowing vampires existed. Everyone does in the modern world. You're part of society, even if you're hidden parts of it. And I know you're not randomly violent. There are laws, codes. Tonight that vampire broke them, and you enforce the consequences. That's not the same as cruelty. Some would argue the laws themselves are cruel. Some would argue all legal systems have elements of cruelty. Humans execute criminals too in some places." She looked at him seriously. "I'm not naive. Draven, I know you've killed. I know you'll probably have to kill again. But I also know you're fair, just. You protect those under your care. That matters more to me than the fact that you're a predator." "I could hurt you," he said quietly. "Even accidentally. I'm stronger than you'll ever be." "You won't." She reached across the space between them, taking his hand. "You're more careful with me than anyone's ever been. You hold Isolde like she's made of glass. You're terrified of your own strength. That's the opposite of someone who'd hurt me." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I want to give you everything. Safety, security, anything you need. But I can't give you a normal life, can't give you daylight dates or growing old together. If you stay with me, you'll be tied to the night, to vampire society, to all of this, I know." She didn't look away. "And I'm choosing it anyway, choosing you, choosing this strange little family we're building. You could still change your mind, still walk away." "I could, but I won't." She moved from her chair to his, settling in his lap, and he wrapped his arms around her automatically. "Stop trying to give me outs. I don't want them." So he stopped arguing, started instead to simply accept the gift she was offering. Her presence, her love, her choice to be part of his world. The months passed and their relationship deepened. Vivian moved into the estate officially at 6 months, taking a suite near the nursery at first, though she spent most nights in Draevan's chambers. Isolde grew, hitting milestones that filled Draevan with wonder and terror in equal measure. First words, first steps, the beginning of a personality that seemed to be equal parts his stubbornness and her mother's grace. And Vivian was there for all of it. Not as an employee anymore, they'd officially ended that arrangement, hired an assistant nanny for daytime hours when Vivian needed to focus on other things. But as a partner, a mother figure, the person Isolde reached for when hurt, called for at bedtime, loved with the simple totality children possessed. "Does it bother you?" Vivian asked one night, 8 months into their relationship. "That she calls me mama sometimes?" They were getting ready for bed, that comfortable domesticity of shared space. Draevan looked at her in the mirror, where he cast no reflection, but she did. "Why would it bother me?" "Because she's not mine, not biologically. Because her real mother, Serafina, would have loved you," Draevan said quietly, turning to face her directly. "She wanted our daughter to have love and care and stability. You've given her all of that and more. If Isolde calls you mama, it's because that's what you are to her. That's what you've become to both of us." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I love her so much. I didn't expect to, not like this. I thought I was just taking a job, and instead I got a family," he finished, pulling her into his arms. "We got a family. Is that what we are, if you want to be?" He pulled back enough to look at her face. "I know we've only been together 8 months. I know by human standards that's fast. But I told you before, vampires mate for life. In my heart, you're already mine. You have been since you sang that lullaby to my crying daughter." "The first night we met," she said softly. "The first night my life changed." He brushed her hair back from her face, gentle and reverent. "Vivian Porter, will you marry me? Will you let me make this official in every way that matters? Will you be my mate, my wife, Isolde's mother in truth as well as practice?" She stared at him, tears spilling over now. "You're proposing? Right now? Like this? I'm in pajamas. I don't care what you're wearing. I care about your answer." "Then yes, of course yes, I love you. I love her. I want all of this forever." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, pouring 3 centuries of loneliness and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'll get you a proper ring. Plan a proper proposal. Do this right. You already did it right." She smiled through her tears. "This is perfect. We're perfect." They married a month later in a private ceremony on the estate. Vampire and human custom blended together, ancient vows spoken in the presence of the coven leaders and Vivian's small family. Maya stood as her maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Alaric served as Draevan's best man, looking impossibly pleased, and Isolde, 14 months old now, toddled down the aisle dropping flower petals with chaotic enthusiasm that made everyone laugh. When Draevan kissed his bride, the assembled crowd cheered, vampire and human voices blending together. New tradition being written, new possibilities being forged. The reception lasted until dawn, when Draevan had to retreat from the threatening sun. Vivian came with him to his chambers, now officially theirs, and they celebrated their marriage properly, slowly, learning each other with the knowledge that they had forever stretching ahead. "Are you happy?" Draevan asked afterward, both of them tangled together in the darkness. "Impossibly," Vivian murmured against his chest. "I never thought I could have this kind of love, this kind of family." "Neither did I." He held her closer, marveling at the warmth of her. "You saved us, you know. Isolde and I. We were drowning before you walked into our lives. You saved me too, gave me purpose again after losing Mom. Gave me a reason to believe in happy endings." They drifted into comfortable silence, the kind that came from perfect contentment. Eventually Vivian spoke again, voice drowsy. "What do we tell Isolde when she's older and asks how we met?" Draevan smiled in the darkness. "We tell her the truth. That I was a vampire king who didn't know how to comfort his crying daughter, and you were a woman who couldn't walk past a baby in distress. That you whispered a lullaby, and I stood frozen at the door, and everything changed in that moment. That's a good story. It's our story, the beginning of everything." Vivian tilted her face up, finding his lips in the dark for a soft kiss. "And the middle is pretty great too." "The middle is perfect," he agreed. "But I think the best parts are still ahead." He was right. The years that followed were rich with the kind of joy Draevan had never imagined possible. Isolde grew into a bright, confident child who inherited his power and her mother's kindness. She called Vivian Mama without hesitation, and Serafina birth mother. with the reverence due to someone who'd sacrificed everything for her existence. There was room for both in their story. More children followed. A son first, with Vivian's hazel eyes and Draevan's silver hair, then twin daughters who came screaming into the world with vampire strength and volume. Vivian survived all 3 pregnancies. Half-vampire children were less dangerous to carry than full vampire, though still difficult. Draevan stayed by her side through every moment, terrified and awed in equal measure. Their family became something of a legend in vampire society. The Northern King who'd married a human and built something unprecedented. Children who walked between both worlds, comfortable in daylight and darkness alike. A household that proved vampire and human could not just coexist but thrive together. When Isolde turned 18, grown into a beautiful young woman with her father's strength and mother's compassion, she asked about her birth mother properly for the first time. They sat in the library, all 5 of them, Draevan, Vivian, Isolde, and her younger siblings. And Draevan told his eldest daughter about Seraphina, about her grace and power, her love and sacrifice, how she'd wanted Isolde more than anything, had been willing to pay the ultimate price to bring her into the world. "She sounds amazing," Isolde said quietly when he finished. "She was," Draevan agreed. "I loved her very much, but you love Mama too," Isolde said, glancing at Vivian. "I do. Differently but just as deeply. Your heart doesn't have limited capacity for love, little one. It expands to hold everyone who matters." "Am I allowed to love her memory even though I never met her?" Isolde asked, "and still love Mama who raised me?" "Of course," Vivian said softly, reaching for Isolde's hand. "Love isn't a competition. Seraphina gave you life. I got the privilege of watching you live it. We're both your mothers, just in different ways." Isolde smiled, tears in her pale blue eyes so like her father's. "I'm lucky, aren't I, to have been loved by so many people?" "We're the lucky ones," Draevan said. "All of us. This family, everything we've built, it started with love and sacrifice. And it continues the same way." That night, after the children were all in bed, Draevan found Vivian on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. She stood in moonlight that painted her in silver, still beautiful even as age began to touch her edges. They'd discussed the possibility of turning her, making her vampire so they could have eternity together. But Vivian had chosen to remain human, at least for now. "I want to experience my life naturally," she'd explained. "Want to age with grace rather than freeze in time. Maybe later, when I'm older, I'll change my mind. But for now, I want to be human with you. Want to prove that vampire and mortal can build something real together." He'd accepted her choice, though it meant one day he'd have to face losing her. But that was decades away still. They had time. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, joining her at the balcony railing. "Everything," she said softly. "How strange life is, how unexpected. I went from cleaning houses and dreaming of opening a bookstore to being a vampire queen raising half-vampire children in a Gothic estate. It's absurd. Regrets? Not a single one." She turned to face him, smiling. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. That Isolde had to cry for me to discover you existed. Maybe that's how it had to happen. Maybe we needed that exact moment to find each other." She moved into his arms, fitting against him perfectly after all these years. "Do you remember what I told you? That first night when Isolde was sick? You told me many things. I said you weren't alone anymore." She looked up at him. "Did I keep that promise?" He thought about their family sleeping safely in the rooms around them. About the life they'd built from nothing, from a single chance encounter. About how a crying baby and a kind stranger had given him something he'd thought lost forever. "You gave me more than I ever dared hope for," he said quietly. "A wife, a family, a reason to believe in happy endings." "Then I guess we both got our happy ending," Vivian said. "The vampire king and the woman who sang lullabies. The beginning was pretty good," Draevan agreed. "But this," he gestured to encompass their home, their life, everything they'd created. "This is even better." She laughed softly. "You're such a romantic." Who would have guessed the fearsome vampire king was secretly soft? "Only for you," he said, kissing her forehead. "Only ever for you." They stood together in the moonlight, 2 people from different worlds who'd found something extraordinary together. Their story had begun with tears and ended with joy. With children's laughter echoing through halls that had once been silent. With love where there'd been loneliness. Inside the estate, Isolde stirred in her sleep, dreaming of the mothers who'd loved her and the father who'd do anything to protect her. Her siblings slept peacefully, safe and cherished. And in the library, the family photos on the walls told their story. Vampire and human, ancient and modern, darkness and light, all of it balanced perfectly because 2 people had chosen love over fear, had built something new and beautiful from the ashes of loss, had proven that even the most unlikely love stories could have the happiest of endings. Draevan held his wife in the moonlight and knew he'd been granted something rare even among his kind. True contentment, complete happiness. A family forged not just by blood but by choice and commitment and endless love. And it had all started with a woman whispering a lullaby to his crying daughter while he stood frozen at the door, too stunned to move, too captivated to look away. The best things he'd learned often began in the most unexpected moments, with the smallest gestures, with kindness offered freely to a stranger's child, with a song sung in the darkness that became the beginning of light. Years continued to unfold like pages in a beloved book. The estate grew along with the family, rooms added to accommodate children and eventually grandchildren. Isolde followed in her father's footsteps, taking on leadership responsibilities within the coven. The younger children found their own paths. The son became a scholar, bridging vampire and human knowledge systems, while the twin daughters pursued art and music respectively. Through it all, Draevan and Vivian remained the constant center. Their love, tested by time and challenge, only deepened. They learned to navigate the unique difficulties of a vampire-human marriage, the way their sleep schedules naturally opposed. How Vivian had to sometimes represent the family at daytime functions while Draevan handled nighttime politics. The reality that she aged while he remained frozen. "You're getting gray hairs," Draevan noted one morning, catching Vivian studying herself in the mirror. They were in their private bathroom, comfortable domesticity still rich between them after 20 years of marriage. "I know." She touched the silver threads at her temples. "Does it bother you?" "You're joking." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, looking at their reflection, or rather at her reflection beside the space where his should be. "You're more beautiful now than the day we met. Every year adds depth, character. You wear time like jewelry." "That's poetic." She leaned back against him. "But I'm 46. You're frozen at 347. People are going to start wondering. Let them wonder. Everyone who matters knows our story, knows you chose humanity." "That's brave, Vivian. Not something to hide." "Sometimes I think about taking you up on the offer," she admitted quietly. "Turning. Staying with you forever." His arms tightened fractionally. "And other times?" "Other times I think about how lucky I am to experience a natural human life, to watch our children grow knowing I earned every moment, that nothing was given by magic or immortality, just pure mortal existence." She turned in his arms. "Is that selfish?" "It's honest, and I meant what I said. The choice is yours. Always. If you want eternity with me, I'll give you my blood in a heartbeat. But if you want to live your natural span, I'll treasure every moment we have, even knowing you'll lose me eventually. Even then." He cupped her face gently. "Loving you, being your husband, raising our children, these have been the richest years of my very long life. However long I get with you is enough, will have to be enough." She kissed him then, soft and lingering. "I haven't decided yet, but knowing you support whatever I choose means everything." The question of her mortality became more pressing as the years advanced. At 50, Vivian's body began showing more obvious signs of age. Nothing dramatic, just the natural progression of human life. But it sparked conversations throughout the vampire community about what the Northern King's human queen would ultimately choose. Some lobbied for her to turn, argued that the stability of their political alliance depended on her remaining by Draevan's side indefinitely. Others respected her choice to remain human, seeing it as proof that vampires and mortals could coexist without one consuming the other. Draevan ignored all of it, made it clear in every council meeting that Vivian's choice was hers alone, and anyone who attempted to pressure her would answer to him personally. The message was received. The speculation continued, but no one dared approach her directly. When Vivian turned 55, she made her decision. "I want to turn," she told Draevan one evening. They were in his study, her curled in the chair she'd claimed as hers decades ago, him at his desk. "Not because I'm afraid of dying, not because of politics, but because I'm not ready to leave you, not ready to leave our family. I want more time." He'd waited 23 years to hear those words. Now that she'd said them, he found himself asking, "Are you certain, completely?" She stood, crossing to him. "I've lived my human life, experienced everything I wanted to, watched our children grow, buried my sister last year, made peace with my mortality, and now I'm ready to choose immortality. With you, if you'll still have me." He pulled her down his lap, holding her close. "Vivian, I will want you for all of eternity and beyond. But turning is painful, dangerous even. You'll die in a sense and be reborn. There's no guarantee. I know the risks. Isolde explained everything, and I trust you to guide me through." She touched his face, tracing features she'd memorized over decades. "Turn me, Draevan. Make me truly yours in every way. Give us forever." So he did. Called in the most experienced vampires to assist with the turning. Prepared the ceremony with the care it deserved, And on a moonless night, surrounded by their children and closest friends, he gave Vivian his blood and guided her through death into immortal life. The 3 days of her turning were the longest of his existence. She lay in their bed, body racked with the transformation, and he never left her side, held her through the pain, whispered reassurances when she cried out, loved her through every agonizing moment. When she finally opened her eyes on the 3rd night, they were no longer hazel. They'd become the pale gold of vampire kind, luminous and inhuman and utterly beautiful. Draven, her voice was different too, clearer, stronger. I'm here. He helped her sit up carefully. How do you feel? She took inventory slowly, flexed her fingers, breathed experimentally. Strong, so strong. I can hear everything, smell everything. The world is so much more than I realized. It takes adjustment, but you'll adapt quickly. She looked at him then, really looked, and gasped. I can see you, your reflection, you're in the mirror. He glanced at the mirror across the room. She was right as a vampire herself now. She could perceive what humans couldn't. What do you think? That you're even more beautiful than I imagined. She touched his face with new vampire strength, gentle despite the power. We match now, white hair and pale skin and eyes that glow. We're the same, not quite the same, you're newly turned, still learning, but yes, the same species now. He pulled her close, breathing in her new scent. Still Vivian underneath, but layered with vampire essence. Welcome to immortality, my love. She laughed, the sound joyous. Forever with you. I made the right choice. We'll have our challenges, he warned. You'll need to learn control. How to manage your strength, your hunger, your senses. It's not easy. We've never chosen easy, Vivian pointed out. But we've always chosen each other. That's what matters. She was right, of course. The adjustment period was difficult. Vivian struggled with bloodlust, with sensory overload, with the sheer power contained in her transformed body. But Draven guided her with patience earned over centuries. Their children helped, especially Isolde, who understood being part of both worlds. Within a year, Vivian had mastered her new nature, became a force within vampire society in her own right, not just the Northern King's wife, but a power herself. She used her unique perspective, her memories of humanity, to bridge gaps between mortal and immortal communities. Became an advocate for peaceful coexistence. Proof that transformation didn't mean losing one's essential self. Their family thrived. Grandchildren came, a mix of full vampire, half vampire, and even a few human descendants who chose mortal lives. The estate became a gathering place where all were welcome, where old traditions and new possibilities coexisted. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Draevan and Vivian stood together on the same balcony, where they'd had countless conversations over the decades. The estate glowed with light from the celebration inside, laughter and music spilling out into the night. Can you believe it's been 50 years? Vivian asked, leaning against the railing. She looked exactly as she had the day of her turning 25 years ago, now frozen in her mid-50s. Beautiful and strong and eternal. Feels like yesterday and forever simultaneously, Draevan said, joining her. Time is strange when you have enough of it. Do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on a random human woman who wandered into your nursery? He pulled her into his arms, holding her with the certainty of centuries. Vivian, you are the best decision I've ever made. You brought light into darkness, love into loneliness, purpose into an existence that had grown stale. Every moment with you has been a gift, even when I was human and aging, especially then. Watching you live so fully, knowing our time was limited, it made every moment precious. And now, he gestured to the celebration inside. Their family gathered. Now we have forever. But I'd have treasured you regardless. She smiled up at him, eyes glowing gold in the moonlight. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last hour? Terribly remiss of you. She laughed and kissed him. And it felt exactly like the first time and completely new simultaneously. 50 years of marriage, 75 years total since that night she'd first sung to Isolde. A lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. Come on, Vivian said, pulling back. We should get back to the party. Our family is waiting. Our family, Draevan repeated, savoring the words. You know what I'm most grateful for? What? That Isolde cried that night. That you heard her and couldn't walk away. That you whispered a lullaby and I stood frozen at the door, too stunned to stop you. He touched her face gently. That moment changed everything, brought you into our lives. Gave us this. Then I'm grateful, she cried too. Vivian said softly. Because it brought me home, to you, to her, to all of this. They returned to the celebration hand in hand, Vampire King and his eternal queen, and were swallowed immediately by their children and grandchildren demanding toasts and speeches and stories. Draevan obliged, telling their favorite tale, how they met, how they fell in love, how they built something beautiful from the most unlikely of beginnings. Your grandmother heard my daughter crying, he said. Isolde, now a grown woman standing proudly beside him, and couldn't walk past without helping. She sang a lullaby in a language she didn't even understand, and I stood in that doorway watching her calm my inconsolable child, and I knew my life was about to change completely. "Did you fall in love right away?" one of the grandchildren asked, eyes wide. "Not immediately," Vivian answered honestly, "but the seeds were planted that night. Love grew from them, and it's still growing, even now, even after all these years." "That's our legacy," Draven said, looking around at the assembled family. "Proof that love transcends differences, that vampire and human can build something lasting, that the most important moments often begin with simple kindness." The celebration continued deep into the night as vampire celebrations did. But eventually, as dawn threatened, Draven and Vivian retreated to their private chambers, no longer needing to separate, both vampire now, both creatures of night. "Happy anniversary," Vivian murmured as they settled together in their bed. "Happy anniversary, my love." Draven held her close, marveling as he always did at the perfection of her in his arms. "Here's to 50 more, and 50 after that, and on into eternity." "Eternity sounds perfect," she agreed, already drifting toward sleep. "As long as I'm spending it with you." He watched her sleep as the sun rose outside their blackout curtains. Thought about all the centuries before her, empty and cold. Thought about the night she'd walked into his life on pure chance. How she'd taken a crying baby from a stranger and soothed her with nothing but song and gentleness. How in that moment, frozen at the nursery door, he'd witnessed the beginning of his salvation without even knowing it. Love, he'd learned, could be found in the most unexpected places, in lullabies and late nights, in patience and partnership, in choosing each other over and over across decades until choosing became as natural as breathing. He'd been a king for centuries, a father for decades, a husband for half a century, but the role he treasured most was simply being hers. Vivian's partner, her mate, her eternal love, and it had all started with a whispered lullaby, a crying baby, and a man frozen by the doorway watching hope walk into his life on human feet. The best kind of magic, he'd discovered, wasn't ancient power or vampire strength. It was this simple human kindness that transformed everything it touched, love given freely without expectation of return. The choice to help a stranger's child simply because it was the right thing to do. Vivian had given him all of that and more, and he would spend eternity making sure she never regretted stepping through that nursery door all those years ago. Outside, the sun climbed higher into the sky, but inside their chambers, wrapped in darkness and love and the promise of forever, Draven held his wife and knew he was exactly where he belonged, home. Finally, completely, eternally home. The story that had begun with tears ended in joy. With a family that proved different worlds could merge. With love that transcended every boundary. With proof that sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply show up when someone needed help. Vivian had shown up, had whispered a lullaby, had changed everything without even trying. And Draevan, who'd spent centuries believing himself beyond surprise, beyond hope, beyond such mortal emotions as wonder, he'd stood frozen at that door and felt his entire existence shift on its axis. All because of a lullaby, a crying baby, and a woman kind enough to help, the beginning of their forever. And it was only just that, a beginning. Because eternity stretched ahead now, full of promise and possibility. Full of love that would never fade, family that would never stop growing, and moments that would add up to something beautiful and rare and completely their own. This was their happy ending. And their eternal beginning. All from a single night. A single song. A single choice to be kind. The vampire king and the woman who taught him how to love again, together forever, just as it was always meant to be.